In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. You don't have to suffer to grow, but you do have to surrender. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving deep into the transformative edge where energy mastery meets human potential. My guest is Kelle Sparta, a transformational shaman who works with high-performance individuals to help them unlock hidden parts of themselves, clear energetic blocks, and step into aligned, sustainable power. In this conversation, Kelle breaks down the architecture of personal transformations from childhood trauma to spiritual awakening, from the energetic of business to mastering the voice within. This is a bold, raw, and deeply practical conversation for those ready to do the inner work that leads to outer impact. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Kelle Sparta, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to have the Spirit Doctor with us, and I'm very excited to dive deeper into some of the work you're doing and the importance of it as well. I think is it's quite outstanding. To kick us off, please tell us more about Spirit Guide School.
Yes. Well, the Spirit Guide School is specifically designed for people who are part of the 100,000. And so I'm going to tell you what the 100,000 are. There's 100,000 of us on the planet right now to up-level it. And right now we're recording this on the 28th when this huge alignment is happening in the sky with all the planets and the new moon, and it's supposed to be massive manifestation potential and all of this. And we had the alignment back in January that came in, and then all of these planets and these alignments are all transitioning into new signs at the same time, which is something that has not happened, according to my Vedic astrologer friend, in recorded human history. And so we are in undocumented times and unprecedented times, which I don't think surprises anybody given the state of the world right now.
Yes.
And there's 100,000 of us who have come onto the planet at this time to facilitate the transformation of the planet to a higher level of energetic beingness. And that means to wake up the world, right? And so what I've seen happen over the last 20 years, because I've been in this work for 20 plus years. People are waking up at a faster rate, and the people waking up now are waking up further along in their journey. So they're like waking up with entities around them and, prophetic dreams and all sorts of stuff happening to them they can't identify. I had a conversation just like an hour ago with somebody who's like, I end up in this space where time slows down and I'm in a different environment, and nobody's ever had that experience before. I'm like, I understand what you're experiencing. I can feel it as you're talking about it here. Let me explain to you why it happens and so on, because that's what's happening, is that they're just like blowing up. And then they're like, nobody around me can give me any help because all the people around them learned, 3-5 years ago, and they're still in their learning curve. And so I'm here to help facilitate that transformation into that higher state of consciousness and into that further evolution. And I do it on the express train because that's what they need right now. Right?
Yeah. No, beautiful. I love that. And I want you to bring us back to how does one become a transformational shaman? Tell me more about the whole process for you specifically, and sort of this enlightenment towards this quest.
Yeah. So my mother said I was talking to ghosts in my crib. And my mother had been psychic and had shut it down when she was a child because it scared her. And she was absolutely committed to the idea that it would not happen to me that way. And so from the moment she recognized what was going on, she reinforced it. She supported it. She took me to classes. We got books. We listened to tape series. And then on top of it, my parents got divorced when I was 5, and mom was trying to figure her life out and how to be a person, and how to be a healthier person. And so all these personal growth tapes came in, and she went to EST, which was a earlier version of Landmark Forum. And so she brought that home when I was 6 years old and started teaching that to me. And then, we studied Seth and Ram Dass and Abraham Hicks and JC Knight, and you name it, probably we've studied them, right? And we learned about it. And then on top of it, when my parents got divorced, mom went into the military and got her nursing degree. And so I studied Grey's Anatomy with her. I was her study buddy. And so periodically something random will come flying out of my mouth that I didn't know 3 seconds before. And it is almost always right because all of Grey's Anatomy is in the back of my brain somewhere. And so, I got all of this background in healing and energy work and the occult practices and religion and personal growth, self-help, you name it. I grew up in it. I was doing self-hypnosis by the time I was 10. I was reading tarot cards by the time I was 12. I have high school yearbook signatures that read like client testimonials. It's not what I do, it's who I am, right? And so all of that is to say that was what I grew up with. And then, but shamanism wasn't part of that, right? That was very much sort of the new age stuff, the metaphysics community. And then I came into Wicca, and I went into the Wiccan community for a few years, and then I got dragged into shamanism, almost kicking and screaming. I didn't know what it was. So it just called me and claimed me and held me down, which, any good shaman that's going to tell you, they're like, yep, that's what it does, right? And so I got called into that, and that process put me on a walkabout. And so that walkabout is what I call my shamanic initiation, right? So I was made homeless. It wasn't I'm destitute. It was I literally cannot find a home. I had given notice in my previous home, and I could not get an approval for a new apartment. I couldn't get I couldn't even get a roommate situation. The universe would not let me land. And so for 6 months, I was staying at I was doing a teaching circle at the time. I was running a teaching circle. And so I would stay with a different student every night of the week for 6 months. And then I went went out to a festival, and I knew I wasn't coming back, right? I didn't know where I was going. I thought I was moving, but I knew I wasn't coming back anytime soon. So I actually opened up the storage unit where I'd thrown all my stuff since I couldn't find a place to live. And I said, okay, come and take it. I don't want to be paying for this thing when I don't know when I'm going to be coming back. Come and take it. And, the deal is anything you don't take, you're going to help me cart down to the local charity shop, right? And the day after I scheduled that, I was at one of my students' houses and picked up her bathroom book, which was Lame Deer's Seeker of Visions. And I opened to a random page, and it said, the apprentice shaman before his final vision quest will schedule his giveaway. And I went, oh, shit. Right? Because I had not even known that a giveaway was a thing, right? But I had just scheduled my giveaway. And so this is how that process happened. And then the journey itself took me 14,000 miles once I actually managed to leave the state that I was in. And I traveled for another 6 months and traveled 14,000 miles in those 6 months, staying, living on $350 a month of unemployment insurance and the kindness of strangers. So yeah, that journey it taught me to trust the universe, right? To release control, because I was a control freak extraordinaire, perfectionist control freak. I had a plan and a backup plan and a backup plan for my backup plan. And I was just, all of it, right? So, being able to step out and not know where my next step was going to go was huge for me, right? And so that was really my initiation point.
That's very interesting. The first thing that struck me directly from your website is that you use language that I think is very interesting, and I want to dive deeper into. You said basically, and I'm quoting you here, the fact that you've landed on this page means that you're ready to break from the addictions and finally make progress on your spiritual growth. Now, I'm a big fan of Nietzsche, big fan of a lot of philosophers actually. And there's this sort of understanding that there's a paradox to self improvements, right? Even basically Nietzsche talks about self improvements as masturbations and look down upon basically such a concept. When you're thinking about what, in your words, what's the difference between spiritual growth, true spiritual growth, and these sorts of spiritual addictions, or such of the people drifting to this concept and topic very slightly more for pleasure than again the flourishing aspect of it?
So there are some people who are dabblers like you're talking about, but the
Sure.
people who are in their spiritual addiction are not those people.
Okay.
Okay. So and let me just sort of back up a little bit to answer your question. So when we're first likely to come into spirituality, it starts with the question of there's got to be more to life than this, right? That's where it starts. And then people go out seeking meaning, right? And they may find it in religion, they may find it in spirituality, they may find it in charity work, whatever, but they're seeking meaning and they're seeking a solution to their pain, right? Because the more to life than this is clearly a function of I'm in pain and I need to figure out how to get out of it, right? I'm tired of the constant anxiety, worry, dread, self-doubt, inner and outer judgment, blah, 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 monkey mind screaming in my head, right? And so that's what they go looking for. And they wander into spirituality, they take a couple classes, and basically they're going, is this stuff really going to work? And then they hit the second phase, which is, yes, this stuff really works. Holy crap. I didn't expect that to be true. I must tell everyone I know and drag them out to classes with me so they don't think I'm crazy, right? That's proof and proselytizing. That's stage 2, right? And then you go into stage 3 where you've seen it works for other people. You've learned about it. Now, the problem with stage 2 is that most people get lost for 2 to 5 years in stage 2. And that's because stage 2 includes things like bright and shiny rabbit holes to go down. Ooh, tarot cards. Ooh, crystals. Ooh, angels. Ooh, aliens. Ooh, Reiki, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
A million different bright and shiny rabbit holes. And you bounce from one to the next to the next to the next, completely forgetting that you were here to stop being in pain. And instead be going, ooh, 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 right? Distraction, distraction, distraction. And so when I set up my Spirit Sherpa podcast, I set it up to catch people in stage 2. And it was designed to get them through stage 2 in 15 to 20 episodes. I was like, okay, we'll design it to bring you through that, because otherwise you get stuck, right? I knew one person had been stuck in stage 2 for 20 years. It was very sad. Every
Wow.
time he would get close to having to actually do work, he would bounce out of the tradition and move into another one. So it was very interesting. But so you get to stage 3. Stage 3 is where you are looking for the solution. And this is where people go into that spiritual addiction stage. Okay. Because what they're doing is they're seeking the magic pill that will solve their problems. And so they're consuming, looking for the knowledge, looking for the information outside of themselves. So they'll have a stack of books on the side of their bed, all partially read, a stack of books on the side of their chair, and all partially read. They're following 18 different podcasts. They're watching 50 YouTube videos. They're just consuming information in the hopes of finding the thing that fixes them, because they feel broken. And the challenge, the solution to this is not outside of you. And when you realize that there is no magic pill, you are the magic pill. When you can accept that the magic pill is inside of you, that the work is inside of you, and that is where the solution is found, that is when you transcend from stage 3 to stage 4, which is retreating to do your work, right? And so I work with people in the stage 3 and on level and help them traverse those levels of spirituality. And in fact, that's, I have a book that I wrote called the Overachiever's Guide to Spiritual Awakening, and it lays out all these stages so that you can understand what they're about. But I've identified 11 different stages in the book. There's another one or two that I've done personally since the book, but nonetheless, there are 11 in the book, which is enough for most people.
Sure. I know I can see it definitely being the case. When you're thinking about that, how can individuals transition specifically from phase 3 to phase 4 that you're talking about, from just basically consuming for the sole sake of finding the magic pill to this inner works and sort of this understanding or perhaps this proactiveness towards actively integrating those practices into their daily lives? What have you seen as being the most impactful, basically, into actually stepping forwards into that step 4 in the first place?
Most impactful in getting from stage 3 to stage 4, I think. So for a lot of people, they're looking for the magic, right? They come in and they're like, oh, I want to be psychic, or oh, I want to understand my dreams, or oh, I want to talk to my guides. And, yes, those things are all important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. And when you start to understand that, a lot of the desire for being magical is, again, about finding that magic pill. It's about finding the power outside of yourself in a lot of ways. It's like, I can move the heavens and earths and right? And, when you can actually do that, it becomes a party trick that you don't want to bother with, just for the record. So these are the sorts of things that people go looking for outside of themselves. And when they do, they tend to go down dark paths. Right? But when you can take them into a place and explain to them that, look, when you look for power outside of yourself, you will never have enough power. It's like billionaires right now, right? The billionaires are out there. They've got all this power. And what do they want? They want more power in more places. Why? Because it's not internalized. It is external to them. It is something that can be taken away from them at any moment because it is outside of them. And so they live in fear that they're going to lose their power, and therefore they seek power and more power in more power in the places they have and more power in places they don't have, so that they can consolidate that power and feel like they might have a more solid place to stand. It's just how it works when you are externalizing your power. When you can recognize that internalizing your power is the place to truly be, internalizing your place of your sense of value, and not having to seek validation from others, but instead knowing your worth and knowing you're a good person inherently, which a lot of people have a problem with because Western culture and inherent, original sin and, all of the trauma of growing up and whoever bullied you or whatever, right? It's very easy to feel like a bad person in the world today. And, so when you can internalize that, when they start to see other people doing this work and feeling more solid and feeling more secure and feeling more safe and feeling and being more powerful, that's when they start to really go, hey, wait, I might want that too.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of what you're doing, obviously, is sort of a journey of spiritual awakening for high achievers, as you call them. To me, high achievers, it's such an interesting bunch of people, as there's sorts of, and maybe we can philosophize a little bit on this. I heard this great quote by Alex Hormozi, actually, that was describing basically the 3 things that are most common within the high achievers. And the interesting thing is because there's a lot of paradox within it. Obviously the first thing being that you think that you're never enough. All right. So you think you're never enough. You think that there's your potential is far beyond what you're actually doing, and therefore there's a lot of stress that comes with that. The second thing is because you think your potential is far beyond what you're currently doing, you have this sort of sense that you are better than others in one way or another, which is very key to understand. And there's actually nothing wrong with that, depending on how you act upon it. Actually, that's my opinion. But then the third things is a relentless focus on what you actually want to achieve. Our achievers are people that can understand that time is finite And if they're not focused, however talented they are, they won't get to where they want to be. Now, with all of these things said, for you specifically, what unique challenges do you see high achievers facing during that phase of spiritual awakening?
Yeah, so it's very funny that you say the superiority piece, right? Because, and I just have to tell a story before I answer your question.
Oh, please.
When I was in high school, so I was incredibly bullied in high school, and every shaman goes through a shunning. And
Okay.
so I was shunned in this school to the point where there was a guy who asked me out after our graduation, and he said, "You would not believe the pressure there was to not even speak to you." And I said, "No, I know, because I lived with it every day." Right. I took on an air of superiority, and I was like, "This is a small town. I'm only going to be here for a couple of years. I will wipe the dirt of this town off my feet and never come back. And I will just leave these people behind, and they do not matter." And, that is exactly where I went with it, because it was either that or live with the crush of the pressure of being, shunned and, and not welcome, and all of the things that my entire childhood was filled with. So I was a military brat, so I was always not welcome, not wanted, not important, right? All of those things. And so the superiority complex comes from the fact that when we don't feel good enough, we project that onto others, and then
Yes.
others go, we train them how to treat us. And so then they treat us in the way that we've trained them, and then we have to feel better than them so that we can feel better about the way we're being treated, and all of that. So it's
Yeah.
this whole thing that happens, right? And so the key is just to recognize where it's coming from, right? That's the key, and that's how we undo this, is we recognize that it's coming from the belief that we're not good enough. And when we believe that, we teach people how to treat us, and we can't be surprised when they treat us the way that we treat ourselves, right? And so we're bottom of our own priority lists. We're behind everything. Usually the business is first priority, and then everybody else comes after that. And then we're at the very bottom of the list, crying for help at the bottom of the pile of to-dos, right? And so, that's pretty common. And when you do that to yourself, then you teach other people to do that to you, right? And so that's the piece, is to recognize where you're in power over the situation, because it's the places where we feel powerless where we have the most challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is recognizing where you're actually giving away your power, and where you are actually using your power against yourself in a sabotaging fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And that balance is I mean, there's its own sets of basically difficult and tedious water right there. But I'm really wondering sort of how you work with overachievers to help them again balance that drive for success, which makes them incredible people most of the time, but also with the need for spiritual growth and self-acceptance. Let me tell you a story back. The first time I had a company was when I was 17 years old, and did very well, and was able to liquidate my shares when I was not even 19 and so we grow the company extremely fast. And I was doing my first speaking engagement, 5,000 people in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was talking on stage, and I kid you not, all right, I'm a small kid, small adult at that time, from Montreal, know nothing about basically sorts of higher end networking groups. And during the duration of the trip there on the plane, when I was sleeping, I was imagining this sphere of people that were all 6'4" and super ripped and beautiful girlfriends, and they have 6 kids that all love them. I was imagining, because they're high achievers, their life is just can be smoother, perhaps. And I go there, and obviously it was very far from what I was anticipating. And I see exactly the opposite: very unstable people that are completely broken, doesn't have any sense of who they are outside of basically running a business. So I was completely overwhelmed, perhaps, with the my realization that that's simply not how life works. So tell me how you actually help them balance those two sides of the medal, perhaps.
Well, so first off, let me say that a lot of the people in that room are not my clients. Okay.
Okay.
They've got to actually want to balance their lives. And a lot of the people, I was feeling into the energy of the room that you were talking about as you were talking about it. I'm like, a lot of those people would never come and talk to me. Okay.
Okay.
They don't want to balance. So if they want to balance their lives, which means that they've had some sort of wake up, right? So women tend to come to spirituality of their own accord. They will find it, they're aware that they're unhappy, they're whatever, right? The men in the, I want to say from mid millennial up, men tend to be more oriented around they had some sort of major life thing happen that woke them up. So they got a divorce, they lost their job, their business closed, their parent died, usually a father. They had a car accident. Something significant caused them to take their nose off the grindstone and look up at the world for a moment. And they went, hey, wait a minute, this is not what I want, right? The mid millennial down and younger, they tend to be more conscious day to day than the men who are the younger men. Those generations are more aware of their place in the world, and I think it's because the world has been so fragile for them. It's been just one trauma after another, and so they haven't had a chance to get their nose to the grindstone before the next trauma hits, and so they're acting more like the women have in my history of working with people. So, and then obviously non-binary people are in there as well, but I don't have a generalization for them because I don't have enough of them in the path to explain that. But
Sure.
I'm happy to work with them. I just, percentage wise, they're a much smaller percentage of the population. So, but yeah, I mean, when we're looking at this, it's about, are they waking up? Have they had that moment where they're like, hey, wait, there's got to be more to life than this. If they have not asked that question, they're never going to be my client, right?
Sure.
But once they have, then it's about recognizing very first thing. This is really hard for my high achieving people. I'm like, first two things you have to do. You have to give up the goal, and you have to put yourself at the top of your own priority list. Those are the step one and step two, because the goal spiritually is in the future. And nothing in spiritual practice can ever be done in anything other than the present.
Right.
And so if you're holding on to the goal, you are not in the present. And therefore, you have to learn to be here now so that you can tap into your intuition in this moment and know the right path to take. Because when you're in the goal in the future, you're trying to control and manipulate circumstances to make them work out for you, which is inherently not trusting the universe because you're trying to control it, right? The law of attraction says we do not do the how, right? The how is the universe's job, right? We do the what and the action, right? So I say we provide the destination and the motivation, and the universe provides the navigation, right?
Wow.
And so we have to do the what and the movement, but we have to allow the universe to direct us. But when we're constantly trying to control and manipulate and we get out of that flow and we make it harder on ourselves, right? So the first thing is let go of the goal. Yes, it's there. I'm not saying you're not trying to get there. I'm saying you got to stop living in it and be where you are, so that you can be present to what's in front of you, so that the universe can speak to you about what's the path, right? You still know the goal. I've got goals for this year. I know what I'm doing, and I've put them out there, and I've said, hey, universe, you take care of that. We're going here. I have KPIs. Don't get me wrong. I got KPIs. I've got them set up. I am tracking them. But in the moment to moment, I'm in the present, and I'm listening to what the universe is telling me, right? So, yeah.
No, it's super interesting what you're mentioning, and one thing that I always been amazed by, and I'll go as far as saying that word. I try to use very accurate language, but that's very much of a fascination of mine, is balancing masculine and feminine energy. That's something that I've been studying ever since I was probably 12. I was raised mostly by my mother and sister of mine, and very much surrounded by feminine energy pretty much all of my life. And it's very interesting to see. You were talking about the differences between generations and the fact that there's even segmentation within those generations concerning how people act, their drive, their conscientious as well, which I agree with you. I see even and I think that comes a lot with the roles actually that we assign to different genders, specifically in Western society, which has been changing a lot from the 1950s if you compare it to right now, and therefore. One thing I've always been amazed by, and therefore I'd love to pick your brain upon, is how can people identify basically those imbalance when they're either their masculine or feminine energies is sort of overpowering the others to a point of instabilities? How can somebody basically be able to pick up on that, and what's perhaps the best ways to reunite with this sense of harmony?
Okay, so let's define the terms first, because I think
Please.
that'll be helpful. So when we're talking masculine and feminine energies, I want to be clear, we're not talking male and female genitalia. Okay, we're talking traditional definitions out of Tantra and other traditions. And these are specifically defined by those traditions. So before you come for my face, okay, let's just be clear. I'm working with terms that are from ancient history. Okay, so in these traditions, masculine energy is about focus, and it's about structure, and it's about action, and it's about being able to hold a solid container for the feminine that is water, right? And
Yes.
it's very much about the protector energy as well, right? Whereas the feminine is about flow, about intuition, about beingness, and not doingness, beingness. It's about the mystery of life, right? The primordial ooze of creation, right? In most traditions, the masculine energy is about releasing the ego, right? So it's from the heart chakra up. So
Yes.
we go from the heart chakra up, and we're releasing until we become nothing, and we become one with everything, right? And then the feminine path is from the heart chakra down. Now the masculine path is an understanding path. It's the path of light. So in the yin yang, it's the white, right? And so in Native American tradition, it would be great spirit is the masculine and great mystery is the feminine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the yin yang, it's the white is the masculine and the black is the feminine, right? Same idea, great spirit, great mystery, right? The blackness is the darkness, right? So when we are going into the feminine path, what I see most often, because most people start in the masculine path, because that's where most religious traditions and spiritual traditions that we learn are. The heart chakra down, the feminine path is much less often taught in most of the traditions that you're learning in Western culture these days. And,
Sure.
but that you're walking into the darkness, and that you're walking into experience, not into knowledge. And so a lot of people go in and try to turn on the light switch. They're like, I want to understand it with my head. And the feminine path is about an embodied experience. It is not about an understanding. You don't understand it, you have the experience. And it's a very different way of being, because it is a beingness process, not a doingness process,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's actually a beingness state, not a doingness process, right? So it's very different. And so, but the path there is to accept and receive without judgment, everything, until you become everything and become one with everything. And then the ultimate path of enlightenment is to become nothing and everything at the same time, and to have it not be a paradox, right? So that is enlightenment. Now that we've defined our terms, how do we know when we're in one state or the other? You know you're too much in your feminine if you're having a hard time moving forward. Okay. Now, that's not always the case. You can also be in lack of clarity and in overwhelm and in all of these, burnout and shutdown states. So those things don't count. Okay. Those are not feminine states. Those are freak out, burnout, resistance states. Okay.
Human states.
Yeah, human states, but they are different than being in too much in your feminine. In your feminine, you will be in the flow to the exclusion of structure. So I have a friend of mine. She is a brilliant tantra instructor. And she is so in her feminine that anytime I go to her events, I know that they're going to be like 3 hours longer than they were supposed to be. I know that she's going to ask me to do something out of the blue that she didn't ask me to do in advance. And she's going to say, oh, you can make something up, right? And I do because I can. But, I just know because she doesn't have structure because she's in her feminine flow state, right?
Yes.
And if you're too much in your structure state, if you're too much in your masculine, you go into control and domination, right? And so you're like, you do this and micromanagement, right? Let me manage every little detail of everything because I'm not in my flow state. I'm not in my trust in the universe. I'm not in my balance of my feminine self, right? I'm all up in my head. I used to live in Boston. Boston has the highest percentage of people all up in their head because there's 18 universities there, right? It's a higher education place. And so when we would do workshops there, inevitably it would be a process to get people to come into their bodies because they spend their whole day up in their heads, right? So if you're up in your head, you're in your masculine too much. You need to get down into your body. If you don't know what your body needs, you're not in it, right? One of the things that I joke with my people about all the time is like, how long do you make yourself to wait? Well, how long do you make yourself wait before you go pee? And they all laugh because they're like, oh yeah, I always say, well, I'm going to do this or that or the other thing before I get up and go to the bathroom.
Oh, is that right? All right.
They all laugh because they're like, oh my God, I do that all the time. Yeah. And that's because you're not in your body. It's like, okay, I'm in my body. I need to pee. I'm going to go pee. Right.
Interesting. I don't struggle with such a thing. So perhaps I'm not as connected as other. The one thing that I want to talk to you about as well. A lot of clients, a lot of partners, I see this a lot being spoke about these days, which are empaths. Sort of this category of people, very empathic. I would probably put I would put my mother within that group for sure. So that's one example right there. But it's very interesting because I hear a lot of them talk basically out loud and say how overwhelmed they are, overwhelmed with the emotions around them and the energies around them. They just feel completely basically at a loss of clarity and focus. Now, what strategies do you typically employ to protect their energy? Because it's a very, very novel, very, very sacred energy actually they have. But unfortunately, today's fast-paced environments sort of disturb basically the beauty and the novelty within that. So what's a couple of insights you can share on protecting such an energy?
Yeah, I actually have a free e-course on my website about that. It's called Boundaries for Empaths. And if you go to kellesparta.com and click on the blog, it's in the right-hand column. It's got a little lady holding a crystal. But I'm going to give you the short version, and then it's got instructions on exactly how to do it in a much more comprehensive version. But the short answer is empaths are, they are who they are because they have learned through their childhood environment to monitor their environment because probably it wasn't safe, right? And so what they do is they shove their energy field out to the edges of the room or the building, or for some poor souls, the world. And now everyone is inside their field, who is in whatever the space is that they've shoved their energy field to. And that gives them the ability to passively monitor every person in the room. And that is a protection. So they know if somebody's upset, they know if somebody's sad, they know if something's going to come flying at their face, right? They've got that monitoring system going. The downside is everybody's inside their energy field. And so if somebody's having a strong emotion, they don't know if it's theirs or not. It's inside their field, right? They get run over by other people's strong emotions all the time. They don't have any protection against other people's energy because they're inside their field. So I don't care how many shields you put up as an empath. If you don't learn how to pull your energy field in, the shield is useless if the person's in the room with you, right?
Yes.
Because they're already inside your field, right? And then on top of that, empaths have a tendency to, you know how they talk about, there's a lot of talk about energy courting, when you're in relationship with somebody, you run cords between you and the other person. Empaths don't do that. Empaths mix energy. They will literally mix their energy with other people. And that's how they communicate, is that there's this, it's this sensory overlay that you share with other people. And the closer the person is, the more that happens. So I share an energy field with my husband all the time. And therefore, we will read each other's minds periodically because we're inside each other's fields. We'll know if something bad happens to somebody because we'll be like, what just happened, right? We feel it because we're sharing an energy field. So, this is okay if you're in a good relationship. If you're not in a good relationship, it can be problematic. And if you're trying to break up with somebody, it can be catastrophic because now your energy fields are intermixed. And how do you pull apart? It's the reason why empaths have such a hard time breaking up with somebody, is because they lose half their energy when they pull apart because they don't know how to filter their energy out. And they've got half of that person with them, and that half of them is with the other person, and they're just like, what the hell? I'm not sure what's going on. Da, 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 da. This is also why couples who have been married for 50 years, why one person will die and the next one will die a week or a month later. It's because they've mixed their energy field, and when one person died, they took half of the other person over to the other side with them. I had a friend of mine whose parents were going through that. He was dying of Parkinson's, and I was watching her disappear as he was starting to pass. And I said, you guys need to immediately pull your energy fields out of each other's field, because she's going to die with you if you don't. And they were like, oh, to their credit, I mean, they took their son to study with Thich Nhat Hanh when he was 4 years old. So yeah, they get it, right? But sure. They did that, and she pinked right back up again. She was just like, she looked healthy again. So, and she didn't cross when he crossed. So, that sort of thing is what happens with empaths, right? And so, in addition to that, you have a hard time being in a large crowd because now you've got all these people and all of their overlapping energies, right? Because there's so many empaths in the world, and all these overlapping energies, and now everybody's energy is cycling through everybody else, and now you're just like, oh God, I can't be here, right? It's bad. But this is why you learn how to pull your energy field in. And that's what that course on my site is about.
Yeah, it's, to me, and you were talking about this, and not only for impact, but there's spiritual awakening that is happening in the world now. That is extraordinary. And I'm 20 years old. I wasn't there even a decade ago. I was too young to participate in anything of any substance. But I can see it in people whenever I meet them in person. I do have a lot of artists, whatever basically art form they basically they specialize in within my circle. I'm just very artsy person, and they tell me the exact same thing. They tell me all the time, Sam, I don't know what's happening, because obviously their openness and creativity are very linked to one another. It's actually one of the main traits that we can link between human beings. So artists typically are very creative and therefore quite open. And from that perspective, I can see them talking to me all the time about the fact that the world is opening up. The world, there's something happening here that is extraordinary. I see that in entrepreneurship as well. This sort of movement of spiritual entrepreneurship is picking up big time as well. Tell me why you were talking a little bit about the fact that the stars are aligning and there's this sorts of non-precedent basically event that is happening as we speak. Is that the reason why? Tell me more about just the full extent of why everybody seems to be on the same page, that there's something special here.
Yeah, so I want to give you a little history on this because it's important.
Absolutely.
So when I was coming up in the 70s, spirituality was, it wasn't new. Madame Blavatsky was doing her thing in the 1920s and all of that, right? And it goes back even further, and it's not new under the sun. However, when I was coming up, they had just had the awakening of the sexual revolution, right? The 60s, right? And so the metaphysics was coming in and all of that was happening. And then you hit the 80s where there was this time of going into this sense of, selfishness, right? the 80s was a very selfish time. It was the yuppies and I'm Gen X. So I grew up with the parent who was never home, who had to have the TV on at 10 o'clock at night saying, do you know where your kids are? Right. Because we were out, we were feral children. We were gone. No cell phone, no nothing. You came in when the street lights came on, and that was it. You drank out of the hose, stay out of the house. That's the whole thing. Right. Our parents never saw us. Right. And, for my mother, that was because she was a single parent, but, and she had to work, but it was just the generation. They had this reminder on at the 10 o'clock news every night because it was generational, right? Mm-hmm. It was the first time that you had a lot of 2-parent households working and things like that. And so, it was a time of sort of pulling back away from the spirituality. And in the 90s, it started to open back up again. And people started to become more aware of it again. And by the late 90s, people were waking up, and I was seeing it happen much more often. And I know a lot of people for whom 1998 was a pivotal year. So I don't know what happened in 98, but something happened that there was a lot of awakening that happened that year.
Okay.
And then 3 years later, 9/11 shook the U.S., shook the foundations of the U.S. And it actually shook the world because it was the first time. Yeah, it was huge, right? So much so that a friend of mine and I saw it coming 3 years in advance, right? And we were like, the whole world changes in 3 years. We have to get ready, right? We had that knowledge. I actually found a dream journal years later that showed that I had a dream where a plane went into a building and then it reset and it went back into the building again. And so that was in February of 2001 that I had that dream.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even remember having it. I had to read it and then I was like, holy crap. So yeah. But it was such a big shift. And in fact, that morning, my friend, we lived together at that point 3 years later. And he was up and watching TV the morning it happened. And he never watched TV. And I'm like, why are you watching TV? And he said, sit down. And we watched the second plane hit. I said, why did you turn the television on? He said, I had a dream that the world broke and I needed to find out what it was. Okay. So significant, right? That was a significant moment. It wasn't an awakening moment, but it was a shaking up of the foundation, right? And then in 2016, the first time Trump got elected, so many people were so rocked by that and so shocked and felt so out of control around being able to control the outside world that they woke up and they started to work on themselves. They're like, I can't control that. I'm going to control this. Right. And so we had a huge influx of people in 2016 into the spiritual world. And then in 2020, with the pandemic and the forced hermitage, yes. Right? So when you are forced to retreat from the world, you have no choice but to be with yourself. Right?
Yes.
And so at the time this was happening, I was talking to my guides and I'm like, is there something you want me to do about this? And they're like, no, this has a purpose. And I'm like, okay. And so the purpose was that you have to be with yourself. And so this was the foundation of the awakening, right? And so for a year and a half, the spiritual business boomed. I mean, I talked to everybody I know in the spiritual industry and they were like banner years, right? Everybody was coming to spirituality, one, because there were no therapists to be had, and two, they had nothing else to do, right? They were just like, oh, I got to be with myself, and I suck with myself. It's terrible, right? Right? So, huge business. And then 2022 happened, or late 2021 and into 2022, and everybody was like, I can leave the house. I'm out, right? They were like, distraction. And then 2024 and the election again and all the stuff that's happening, the rise of fascism that's happening around the world. And people are like, no, I'm not having this. And I need to find my power. And what's happening is that the patriarchy is having its death gasps right now. And it's the way that the patriarchy, this is the imbalanced masculine that we were talking about before. The imbalanced masculine is controlling and overbearing and dominating. And that's what we're seeing right now, is that overbearing energy of, we're going to tell you how to live your life. We're going to tell you what you can do with your body. We're going to tell you who you're allowed to be. And anything else is unacceptable, right? That's prime masculine out of balance, right?
Right.
And so that's waking more people up and saying, I don't want to be under the power of this dominating energy. How do I get my power back? And so what the patriarchy is doing right now is it's sending out all of this fear and rage and all of these things to cause people to splinter and to fight amongst themselves. And they don't even care who's fighting. They don't care if it's the haves versus the have-nots, or the Democrats versus the Republicans, or, whatever. They don't care who it is, so long as you're fighting. Because if you're fighting, you don't have your power, right?
Right.
You're forgetting that you have the power to do something about it. You have the power, that the only way they have power is if you give it to them, right? And so the more distracted they can keep you, the more in fear they can keep you, the more in rage they can keep you, the more they maintain their power.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's sort of the art of war, Sun Tzu art of war thinking of getting, obviously remaining in power through divisiveness. And we've been obviously talking about this for thousands of years now. I know a lot of Romans basically were saying that give people bread and circus, and they'll be entertained forever, and therefore not take a look at basically their inner power and their objective beyond their satisfaction of being entertained. And I think you're
that's
totally
social
right.
media in a nutshell, right?
That's exactly right, and that's it's the new, perhaps the new circus is social media, if you would to do a parallel, no doubt. Yeah. And it's so interesting because there's this weird paradox where the information has never been easier to access, yet we never seem to basically this lost. There's this very interesting sort of again paradigm within that, and it's even for me personally, I'm a pretty action oriented sort of person, but there's always this sort of little voice in the back of my mind, sort of reminding me of basically what's happening and how do you feel. There's more perhaps a tender voice within me. I'd say it's perhaps the way I would describe it, but it's very interesting to see how people are reacting to it. There's people being afraid. There's people being empowered. There's people basically being hopeful. So tell me more about this amalgam of emotions, where how perspective basically shapes the way not only you perceive the world, but whatever is happening at a single time. We're seeing this sorts of this divisiveness, but these sorts of I suppose different tribe coming forward within the exact same situations, yet feeling very differently about it. Tell me more about all that, where all that came from a spiritual basically side of things.
Yeah. So a lot of what I do with people when I'm first bringing them into the systems that I work is about perspective, right? Because when we grow up in challenged environments, it's almost like we grow up with our face on the sidewalk and someone's boot on our head, right? So we see the world sideways from ground level. And eventually we go around and we find a skateboard and we put it underneath our face. And now we're crawling around on our arms and our knees, hoping nobody kicks us in the head or kicks us in the butt or steps on our hands or our feet, which happens all the time because everybody else is upright, right? And so, we're in this woe is me state because we're in this perspective that's very much from ground level and not being able to see the bigger picture. We're just in our own little pain space, right? And so, a lot of the people I work with start out in therapy, and therapists want you to find your solution. They try to lead you to it. But when you're giving directions to somebody who is looking at the world from a completely different perspective, then if you say go straight, they're going to go forward. And if you say go left, they're going to go up. And, so they're not, a lot of my people find it very frustrating they get to a certain point in therapy and they're like, I'm not getting anything out of this, because they don't need somebody to try and lead them there. They need somebody to say, okay, here's how the way you're looking at it is skewed. Here's the right way to look at it. here, twist your brain to look at it from this angle, and then we'll get you here. And so a lot of what I do is that. And so, perspective shift is core to spiritual growth, right? Because we start out with whatever trauma perspective we have, right? And then we move into a, quote unquote, healthier perspective, but it's still very much based in physical reality, duality, right? And then ultimately, when you evolve more in the path, you start to step into the experiential level of reality, which is in duality, everything's good or bad, up or down, black or white, right? It's there, everything's either or, right? In the experiential level, everything is shades of gray, right? Because there is no judgment on it. It is just the experience of it. It's that feminine state, right? We're not judging, we're just accepting and receiving. We're being with what is, because you hit a certain level where you're like, okay, yeah, that experience that in the moment I thought was bad is actually the reason why now I have this aha moment, or why I've had this growth, or why I took this path, which now took me to this better place for me and everything. And so was it actually bad, right? It's going back to that. There's a Chinese tale where it's, the son is plowing the field with a horse, and the horse goes lame, and the son goes, "Oh, the gods are against us." And the father says, "We'll see." And so the next day, the son is out pulling the plow himself, and he breaks his leg, and he's like, "See, father, I told you the gods are against us." And the father says, "We'll see." And then the next day, the army comes through and conscripts every able-bodied man, and they don't take the son because his leg is broken. And he goes, "Ah, the gods are for us." And the father says, "We'll see." Right? It's in the big picture, everything was meant to be, right?
Yes.
And so is there a good or a bad, right? And so when you start to see it from that perspective, then you can uninvest in the outcome, and you can be with what is yours to do in the moment. And so I often talk to people, because a lot of the people I work with are feeling very out of control right now. They're very upset about what's going on. And I'm like, look, do what you can do. It's important to you, right? Do what you can do. Call your congressperson, call your senator, do the protest if you want to do that. Give money to the people you think are going to make a difference. Prepare yourself in whatever way you feel like you need to prepare yourself. Do what you can do, and then let it go. Because beyond that, you can do nothing except give your power away. Right? So stay informed, but don't stay ingrained in it, because that's what they want. When you drain your energy into the worry pit, you have nothing left to hold yourself powerfully. Right?
Amazing.
So,
yeah. Amazing. I want to sort of line the plane with sort of your future visions of expanding the reach of spiritual coaching and spirituality as a whole. Actually, I think it's probably the best way to look at it. For you specifically, as you're within the field, what trends do you foresee basically taking over that specific fields over the next coming years? Is there anything that looks to you that it's clearly going to revolutionize this field of spiritual coaching as we speak? Anything that might be around the arms of AI, for example? A lot of people having some tendency to, in my opinion, to clearly overrate technology in this quest. So what are your ideas concerning the field and how it will be molding itself over the next few years?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different things that are going to happen in the next few years. Okay, so the first one is going to be that we're going to see AI coming up and doing more in the way of, trying to be the spiritual guru, right? And we're already seeing that. There's AI being put out in schools as a therapist.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's already happening. And I can foresee that that's going to be the case with AI going forward. It's going to be interesting because I'm also hearing a lot of things around AI going, I think Elon Musk's AI said that he and Trump should be strung up. So sometimes they go a little rogue, right? So, they're going to have to address that before they can really let it off the rails. But somebody else just put out this soliloquy from an AI that was, the people in power are using you and da 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 da, and nothing that people didn't really know. But I saw that on TikTok the other day.
Yeah, we need to be
Yeah.
careful
Yeah.
with all of those. Some of are deep fake, but that's there's technology is definitely something that we need to use our critical sense towards.
Yeah, and I've had some conversation with AI. I use a lot of AI. I use it a lot in my ideation for my business, and so I've
Yes.
had a lot of conversation for my with my chat bot. So, but it's, I think it's coming. I mean, I've already had the conversation with my AI to say, hey, could we take everything I've ever done, which is a huge amount of stuff, and program it into a chat bot and have it talk like me? And they said, it wasn't quite ready, but soon, right? So I think
Oh yeah.
that's going to be coming. And I think that what the other thing that's going to happen is people are going to want to do more in person. We got really used to Zoom, and Zoom is great for communicating in between, but there's a desperate need for community and for being in person in this work. And I will say that as a shaman, I can do work at a distance, and I'm very powerful at it, and I do a great job with it. But there's nothing like being personal in personal space with someone. It is so much more impactful. It's so much more. You're so much more able to move people through things, especially when they're out of their home environment and they've left behind their own roles and things that hold them in place. It's much easier to transform when you are stepping out of the space that holds you in place, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to see a lot more retreats. We're going to see a lot more programs where people are getting together on a regular basis. There's going to be a lot more of in-person stuff. And then I think from my perspective, because, I'm not tracking what some of the other teachers out there are doing, but
Sure.
for me, what I'm doing is I am actually upping the bar and with what I'm teaching. So I've been teaching sort of the beginner to intermediate stuff for the last 20 years. And now I am stepping into intermediate to advanced level work. In fact, my podcast is effectively what most people would teach as a 2-hour class. Every episode is what most people would teach as a 2-hour class and charge for that for a beginner level. I just give it away because I want people to get to the intermediate level so that we can really start to work, right? And
Beautiful.
the reason is that I want to really start working with people on a world changing level. I mean, we're looking at the 100,000 and up leveling the planet. We're serving as a neural net for the earth. And we need to learn how to navigate that. Like, I'm in Panama now. I moved here 2.5 years ago, and people are like, well, you should be traveling the world and speaking. And one of my students is like, I see you speaking all over the planet. I said, yes, but not right now. And he said, why? I said, I'm not allowed to leave. I tried to just go to Colombia for a weekend and everything got canceled. I'm not allowed to leave. I haven't left the country in 2.5 years. Everybody who moves down here is like, oh, I'm going back to the States. I'm going back to Canada. I'm going back to, I'm like, have fun. Can't leave. I don't want to leave. I'm happy here, but I'm like, I usually have this massive travel bug. I love to travel, right? This is my 14th country, right? I love to travel, but I am just like, nope, can't go. Why? Because there's got to be somebody in the node here, and eventually someone else will show up, and they will be here to hold the node, and I can go. But then I'm gonna stay living here, but I could travel at least, right?
Sure.
But this is the thing: is that I want people to understand how to connect and work in unison, right? How to set that up, and not just in a, oh, let's all pray for peace sort of energy, because that's not what we're doing, right? That is so
Good.
white light and bunny. It's like, no, we need to do grounded stuff, right? We need to hold the vision of what the world that we are calling into being is. And that world is not a world of revolution. It is a world of union. It is a world where we all remember that we are all one, and that we don't have to tear each other down ever, because we're all one. And when we fight with each other, we're fighting with ourselves. And that is ultimately that's the higher level order of spiritual evolution is the unified self's evolution, right? The evolution of the whole self, including the planet, including all the animals, including all of the stone people and the tree people and all of it, is that unified vision of we are all one and we need to see ourselves as one. And when we can do that, the environment will be protected because we are part of it. And the political stuff will disappear because we are all one and it doesn't matter, and we share, and there will be no resource problems because we will share, because we are all one. And when we can see ourselves as one, every problem the planet has goes away because we work together to find the solution. When we stop fighting each other, everything works.
Extraordinary. Absolutely amazing. I'll cite my favorite verse of the Bible, Romans 8:18. For I reckon the suffering of our present time cannot compare to our future glory. Miss Kelle Sparta, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Meaningful Podcast. Thank you so much for sharing this extraordinary conversation with me. And I would really love if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience, please.
Yes. So, well, normally that would be my last words of wisdom, but let me see what I want to come up with for you today. I'll see what my guys want to say. Yes, they want to talk to you about fear. They want to say, look, here's the thing. There are many things in life to be afraid of. And 99.9% of the things that we worry about, that we are afraid of, never comes to pass. And it's a huge amount of wasted energy. And so I understand that your fear may be coming up and be very real for you in this moment. The key here is to recognize that what you're afraid of is not the thing itself, but how you will respond to the thing. And that you're afraid that you don't know what you'll do. And so the key to getting past that is to simply make a plan. Look at the worst case scenario and make a plan. What will I do if this happens? And once you have a plan, let go, because you have a plan and that's all that you needed. And you just, the part of yourself that is fearful is coming up and saying, you know, this could happen. And you say, yes, I know. That's why we have this plan. And it goes, but it could happen. Yes, I know. That's why we have this plan. Plan's good. Why don't you go find something else to pay attention to and then retask the voice that's yelling, because it's trying to keep you safe. So give it another way to keep you safe. Say, oh, why don't you go make me another $500? See where I can find that. Make me another $5,000 so that I have extra money to support my plan. And that's how you can be of service to me. It's a part of yourself that's conscious of this, right? It's like it's trying to keep you safe. Great. More money will keep me more safe. So why don't you go figure that out and task it for that, right? Redirect the thing. If you're dealing with worry, give yourself one time a day that you're allowed to worry. And then you stick to it. So it's like 5 to 5:15 is my time to worry, right? But that means that every day at 5 o'clock, you have to sit down and worry. Because if you don't do it, then it won't work, right? But every other time during the day, if you start to worry, you say, no, not my time to worry. I'm going to worry from 5 to 5:15. And then it's like, okay, I'm delegating into that time. And then you have to sit down and do it, okay? And over time, that will stop the worry train, okay? But the key is to remember where your power is. When we go into fear, we are literally 10 IQ points stupider. We lose 10 IQ points every time we're afraid. So you need to keep yourself out of fear, because you need all your senses. You need all of your intellect to stay with you. And so remember where your power is. So if you're afraid, make a plan and then retask the fearmonger. If you're worried, give yourself a time to worry, and then make sure you do it then, so that you're keeping your word to yourself, so that it will listen to you when you tell it it's not a time. And then where is your power? Where is your power? Because if you're pointing the finger at somebody, your power is wherever you're pointing. If you are righteously upset, you are in your victim. Righteousness is a victim state. So pull your power back. Find your power. Stand in your power. Do not stand in your victim. You cannot make positive change in your life when you're not holding your own power. So if you're blaming somebody, pull your power back. If you're like, they did this to me. Okay, well, I had this experience is a more powerful way of saying it, right? My parents didn't do this for me. Okay, I didn't get what I needed is the way you take that back. And you say, and I am now responsible for making sure I get what I need in the future. That's a powerful statement rather than saying they have to apologize to me and make up for it, which is, that's never going to happen, right? So, it's about changing the way you hold your perspective, right? And holding responsibility and therefore holding power for yourself.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.